seems as if Olympia in the past has attempted to do things on the cheap, and when they've done that, it's been, you know, the results of you get what you pay for. And the Imagine Olympia campaign, you know, I saw it as $5,000 for a party, $14,000 for a statistically valid phone survey, and anecdotal evidence gathered at Sandon City by Evergreen's students, and okay, what's been the result of that? You know, where's the report? Where's the data? I don't see it anywhere on the website. Is there a report? Is it something that public, you know, that I would need to do a public disclosure request?
Well, they should have, but I thought that was already online. Don't they have an Imagine Olympia webpage?
Well, they do have a report with all the data, results of the phone survey.
I remember they used the council one. So that should be online.
Suggest a different number rather than 30, or to be 150 or whatever. The planner here is on there basically challenges that planning commission member to slope that. Where does those numbers come from? What data do you have to support wanting that distance? And the planning commission turns that around and asks the planner, what data does she have to support 30 foot? She then says, well, that's what the science we got from TRPC is. TRPC didn't do the document, the plan. Our planner and two planners from two other communities gave TRPC the material, which they basically just edited and put in a document and gave back to us. And so basically what the planner is saying in the meeting is, I'm not going to share with you why we want 30 feet. And I don't think that liaison planner has yet to justify why the planning department wants 30 foot. And in this community, 30 foot is about to that post.
So, have you ever, has the person who made that recommendation to your PC ever come to the grant and made a presentation of why they want 30 feet?
She's no longer on staff.
Before you agree here, I looked up what I'm saying, and I want to use some comments. You say this, you're not going to say.
I think it's science. Yes, there is the underlying understanding, but science isn't the only input you have when you come up with the shoreline setback. You know, that's just one example. It's a value and it's your use, and how much room do you need, or how much area do you need to accommodate certain uses. So, getting back to what you were saying, Roger, yes, and Steve, that the council, they do need to state, okay, here are our preferred uses and here's the order, and let's decide how much room it's going to take and where these uses are appropriate. And we can base that on the science. But it does come down to preferred uses and where we want them.
Well, it's more than just science. It's also, you know, what's the vision for the city? What is, you know, the comprehensive plan is the blueprint of, you know, how we expect our city to grow, develop, infill, and, you know, be a better place to live. So, you know, I think from my perspective at least, you know, the minimum standards that, you know, the scientific data requires, you know, simply minimum standards. That we need to look at, you know, the broader quality of life issues and the, you know, the bigger picture, because that's what the comprehensive plan is supposed to be. And then, of course, you have to tie that big picture to the municipal code. So, you know, if the comprehensive plan is to be meaningful, it has to, you know, it has to reflect the people in the city and the people that that work in the city and shop in the city. Those of us in the urban growth area that consider Olympia our hometown are concerned as well, and we are impacted rather dramatically by how the comprehensive plan is formulated, what's in it, and how it's applied. Eddie?
One, Barb and then Heath.
One of the things I spent about 3 hours on just today is that the Utilities Advisory Commission, which I'm a member of, we've been working with exactly what he's saying. And the little piece I was just struggling with today was like urban forestry. So, for example, if we want to have more trees, if we want to have more canopy, if we want to have those kind of things, that as I read the language drives me crazy in a comprehensive plan, because they'll say the city will support, the city will encourage. And I went through the whole thing and I said, this language just doesn't give any direction. It should be the city will find vacant land and reclaim it and plant trees in it. The city will, and there needs to be, that whole section needs to be wills and shalls and not supports, thinks this is. I mean, that is just too wishy-washy and it doesn't give them enough direction. And I think until we go through that, so that's our committee is just going through and each person is taking certain spots and then we're looking at the whole thing and going back and looking at language too, because I think if you aren't directive and don't say, our committee has decided that a 30-foot setback is where we want to be, here it is, we want you to do something with it, what have you set up the committee for? So somehow along the way, the people that are involved in looking at it, giving language and giving direction to the city, to the city council, have to give you more direction, I think. Otherwise, we're wallowing around and nothing's happening. So things like what you put together, there are things that the Utilities Advisory Commission is putting together. Hopefully ours will be useful. We've been working on it really hard, all 6 or 8 of us. We have 2 new people who are just put on the commission, so they're kind of new to the process. But just looking at the whole comprehensive plan and say, make this thing walk on the ground. It's not philosophy anymore. It's an action plan.
It doesn't really become an action plan unless they enact an ordinance.
That what?
It doesn't become really an action plan unless they enact an ordinance.
Right, but I think that if you're not specific about what you
You have to be
want,
specific.
you have to be very specific.
I think one of the areas that uses sort of word is when it comes to the port, which is now going to take, I think it's 4 or 3 sections that they call different divisions and put them into one. And each one of those had a different plan theoretically. What does the city's involvement do? And is it a specific involvement or is it we encourage, we would like to see?
Now, are you talking about the comp plan or the SMP?
Well, I'm talking about what the port is doing.
Oh, with
And asking if this is in accordance with the philosophy of the city council, since they have the final say. Or the port property is just property that belongs to the city, just like my property or her property, anybody else's property. And so what is the attitude of the city about what the port is doing?
That one, that's not a discussion we've had, so I couldn't tell you that either.
For me, bringing it up would be worthwhile because the port is always doing whatever they please, and they don't pay any attention to what the city says is the plan.
One of the things I've actually done is I have spoken with Bill McGregor as well as with George Barner and saying we do need to have a meeting with the Planning Commission and with the City Council as well as with the board and decide how that's going to fit while still allowing them to be a functioning board.
You know what would be nice? We have some data from the executive director about how many, millions of dollars the port contributes to the local economy and jobs. It'd be nice to see how many of those how many of the longshoremen actually live in Olympia or even Thurston County. Because periodically we have ships, more frequently of late, where you have very large trucks rumbling over downtown roads, tearing them up, and exporting, we're like a third world country exporting raw materials to Japan to be finished. So I'm not entirely certain that the port, that is supported by all Thurston County taxpayers is the economic engine that it can and should be by relying on exporting of logs. That's 19th century, early 20th century industry, and that doesn't quite fit with a small downtown, small city like Olympia as being an intelligent use for that land. We are a long, long way from the ocean, and I'm just curious why those logs aren't going to Tacoma instead of eating up our streets, and why economic development, light industry, manufacturing, other jobs can't be done out by the airport, New Market, where there is the land and there is intercity transit, and we can have economic development and jobs that are not dependent upon when the ship comes in, and load it and then it goes away, and the longshoremen move on to the next job. I would really like to see the city hold the port accountable for its activities and the costs of port activity that takes place on the city streets. And that's part of the comp plan too. Is that something that the city of Olympia sees itself as as part of its dynamic engine of its economy? Is the exportation of logs out of our little port?
The logs come from somewhere else.
Yeah, right. Well, so we're providing infrastructure, and that costs a lot of money. What's the benefit that we get from it?
We're kind of light
That it pays for itself, and the port is supported by all the taxpayers. So that would be something I'd really like to see, because that's property that can, once it's cleaned up and remediated, can help propel Olympia's growth and make Olympia a more valuable city. It's kind of like the Alaskan Viaduct. If they did a tunnel, assuming money's no object, that would open up a lot of land. There would be efficiencies. Same thing with the port. If you shut down the exporting of logs and put economic activity in other port property, that opens up a lot of possibilities. Right now, I don't see where we're getting the value that the port administration says that we're benefiting. I don't see that we're benefiting much.
I have a couple of comments, since I've heard some that I'd like to comment on myself. One is I would back Steve's concern that the boosterism that we're seeing about what the port is accomplishing, it has to be looked at. There's an article just today about, how the income from the port is remarkable, and it's an important economic engine in our community. And that's one thing I think that really needs to be examined, whether or not the numbers we're seeing, the actual jobs, the income, because each of us pay in our property taxes something to the port. How is that money being analyzed? in the midst of the port's income. In addition, I would like to mention that Barb sits on the utility committee, and I very much am excited that you're going to use more specific language in your rewriting of the comprehensive plan. As part of the League of Women Voters, we provided to the utility committee a format for working on water issues with the comprehensive plan, and I'm really excited to see whatever is coming out of that committee, to see if any of the recommendations that we made are coming out as well. And one of the things that has hung around for me for my home has been the story of stuff that's available online talks about American communities that recycle and that are very proud of their recycling, and then that recycled stuff all gets shipped away to another country where they actually, it becomes refuse somewhere else. And I have never, possibly it just becomes, they make money by taking it.
Yes.
And I, once again, I got another really glossy thing from the Public Works Department about, be sure you recycle this and you recycle that, and I just keep wondering, they never tell us, once we've recycled this, where is it going? How's it being used? Is there any way to upcycle it, or is it all just being packaged into containers and shipped overseas? If they have the money in their department to tell us to recycle, tell us what happens with the recycled stuff. Because otherwise, I think we should just throw it all in the same container and say, look, we are a country that does nothing but use things up and throws them out, and let's just accept that. Let's not feel virtuous about putting things in separate containers.
One thing, kind of to get back to the port, and I'm going to take advantage because Bill Robinson is here, and he could probably flesh out some details. So Steve, you were talking about really a long-range vision for downtown Olympia. I got a friend of mine who works for the Port Association, and one of the things he was saying is how once the Panama Canal, the expanded version, comes online, how that's going to change all of the Washington ports, and how much is going to be rerouted.
A lot of big, much bigger ships going through the canal. Much too big to go to Olympia.
So in that regard, what's going to happen to our port system? And how many ports will go out of business? Is Tacoma going to be at maximum capacity? Will logs be able to be transported up there, or is it too expensive to go by semis, which it might, semi-tractors? Or are they going to end up shipping over to Grace Harbor? These are questions that the ports are going to have to settle out amongst themselves.
Tacoma didn't have space for it. Tacoma did not want that business.
Right.
That's why Tacoma tried to go down to the U.S. Main Park and get that property down there. They'd have a place to ship the containers down there by truck, get them all to the Port of Tacoma area, and then load them on trains to go across country. But I think Steve just made his point there. People we know identify more now. But went up to Prince Rupert to take a look at that. Prince Rupert is putting in a huge facility, and it's bigger than Canada. And the process there is to transship those containers to the Midwest via a railroad line already exists in Canada. Then you go farther south. You've got the same thing going on down to Los Angeles. The movement of goods here by ships is totally going to change. But right now, in the short term, that log business is going to continue down there because they just won their court case to ship those goods. Now, I don't know how long my contract is, but we're out there. Certainly, at least 20, 30 years.
The Weyerhaeuser contract was fine.
The warehousing contract is up, I think, next year, and they plan to renegotiate it. And I think that this round, it would be appropriate if they put online what they're proposing, rather than keeping the whole thing a secret till it's done and say, well, we now have a contract with Weyerhaeuser. The people who were reelected and the people who own the port had no say in any of that. And when under the Open Records Act, we asked for the information, they said it was a secret of Weyerhaeuser's.
As we talk, I'm getting reminded, you're saying, Karen is one person. If we're gonna move anything, we've got to deal with the entire council. Besides that, I can tell you, I think you kick them off sometimes.
Yeah, the council should ask
What,
them
me?
what they're.
You?
I don't know what you're talking about, Roger. Okay. Bill, what's your take on this?
Well, it's a case of really kind of the tail wagging the dog. And then it's the shipping industry that is really kind of controlling our municipalities all along the West Coast. It's the shipping industry that wants the bigger ships because they can operate them more efficiently. So the domino effect is all the ports now have to go out and spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars to dredge out all the ports and build bigger facilities, just so the shipping industry can be more efficient. And they're kind of dictating what's going to happen. And the reason they're successful at that, because there's the threat. The threat is, if you don't, in Washington or Olympia, upgrade your facilities, we'll just take our shipments elsewhere. Well, there needs to be some discussion about really where those ultimate destinations are for those products. If a big ship, cargo ship, unloads all their televisions and all their automobiles in Los Angeles, then they're going to have to ship them to the Midwest. And it may be more expensive than to ship them overland to the Midwest than it is just to have a smaller ship come into Olympia or the Port of Seattle. And so really nobody's challenging anymore. And it's where the case where public policy just being whiplash and not asking the questions. They're letting a particular industry, who's not a very clean industry or welcome industry, they're really dictating what they're doing. There just seems to be an imbalance there.
But the question needs to be asked, why do we want those television sets
you can
that
ask-
are going to be shipped to the Midwest?
You can ask that question, but just in terms of the logistics,
We don't even want it. Why
even if you
do
don't
we
want it,
trade
but the
them?
logistics are is that you're being led around. You know, one Port Olympia says they need to do something because they want to take business away from Tacoma, or they want to take business away from
Exactly.
Longview. For the state, it's a no-net gain. You know, one community may be able to have a few more jobs, but losing it another spot. But as a statewide, there's absolutely, that competition among ports is actually a net loss for the state.
Well, when there's no boat at our dock, there are no longshoremen working there. And so they're working somewhere else.
That's right.
if
This
they're
one, they
working.
lose their jobs. They just go
Yeah,
elsewhere.
and what you're saying about it within the state, yeah, it is no net gain or loss.
I'm pretty sure I saw a paper the other day that Jeff Davis, one of my point commissioners, she used to work at home. It's just no short of. And I know I have neighbors downstate that regularly went up to Seattle. One of them doesn't have a long short jobs. Now I think we can work down here.
And isn't there also a concern with the fact that Olympia is a small port? There has to be more dredging if you want to accept a larger ship. Larger ships have to go through the Narrows, and there's mucho opportunities for a large ship to have some sort of problems with navigation all the way down here. And just what we want in lower, in the South Puget Sound is to have some sort of oil spill. Suddenly, whatever, gains we have made for the community with, having these ships come here, it's all been lost by losing our environment.
Yeah, even if the trees were just full of the odor, the old things or whatever, it's a terrible mess, a terrible mess.
Plus whatever bilge problems there are with whatever comes out of the ship along the way. I don't know that bringing ships this far south makes a lot of sense.
I thought it was very nice that we gave a home and an incubator to the Peregrine Falcons. And
But I
that
did
was
have
a
a
whole
bigger-
lot of money.
Kind of a more larger question in terms of context about the comprehensive plan. The last group discussion you had, I can't remember if it was a year ago or 6 months ago, but it was down at the administration building, school administration building down on Plum. And Roger was making the exact same point then about wearing down the frustration, how slow the comp plan was going. And that was probably a year ago. What's happened in the last year? Has it gone to the council? Has the council given any direction or re-steered that or
No,
anything?
The planning commission is bogged down. And they're bogged down because the subcommittee didn't do their job. And so the whole planning commission now is having to go through and do what the subcommittee should have been doing in 2010.
But are they doing that now with some more direction
No.
from the council in terms of
No.
where they think the
They're-
values of the
And they're
community
really
are?
not, if I understand right, they're not really coming up with recommendations, but they're doing, because there's disagreement in the group, they're just listing off the different choices and not making a recommendation out of those choices, whether it's heights or setbacks or reaches or whatever. And so the council's gonna get a document that will say that the Urban Conservancy reach A or 5A, we are recommending, well, some people want 15 feet, some people want 30, some people want 50, and some people want 100. And this many people want this many people want that. And that's what they're gonna get. They're not gonna get a recommendation, they're just gonna get 5 minority reports.
Then who ultimately makes a decision on which option to get?
Council.
City council. So there is that opportunity for the city council to inject some values in that process.
But it's gonna be so hard for them because there's so much detail.
And a total waste of energy, waste of effort, because the management decision was not set forth properly when we started. You don't want to go to Spokane, you don't want to go to Seattle. And after that, that's a big policy decision. And what street you drive around Seattle with in detail, you got to get the big policy straight, it's not going to work.
What's the phrase?
The question is, how much does the staff do, and how much does the council do? The staff makes all the decisions, tells the council, here it is. The council says, okay, and then it happens. But unless the staff says this is the decision, the council doesn't seem to do anything. They don't seem to have any original input into the decisions made by the staff.
We could have some, but if you chose to,
They can fire the whole staff and start over.
yeah.
Well, we are in the middle of an election campaign.
But the thing is, the conditions that are driving it aren't gonna change. It doesn't matter who's in office, to be honest with you. Because Eve was pointing out something that when you have a part-time council, that, you know, it's an extremely weak council system.
That's right.
You know, it's one of the, now he's saying, Roger said, I sometimes tick off my colleagues. Well, let me tell you one of the things I ticked off about was getting adequate staff support for the council. Getting adequate staff support for the council. If I ask for something, you know, in some information, and let's say it's gonna take more than an hour of staff time, it has to be approved by the council, which, as Bill knows, he worked in the legislative environment for 30 years. An hour is nothing. Now, if it's something that someone might want, they might say, sure, you can have all the time in the world, you don't have to get permission from the council, but if it's something someone doesn't want, sorry, you're gonna have to go to the council. So what would be a lot easier is if I need information, if I had an assistant, and I could share one, you know, you could have, you know, 10 hours a week or 5 hours if I need some basic research done, or if you could go through certain emails. In Janine Rowe's case, she would like someone to help her with her schedule. But it's little things like that. It's typing up my notes. This can take an inordinate amount of time, and I don't have all that much to go around. So that's the
Following
problem.
up with my point, the next election, we know for sure there are going to be at least 2 new council members. And it could be more. And a new council with a little cohesiveness could stand up and direct staff in a more aggressive way. And I've heard in the last 4 years, in election cycles, talking about changing the form of government in the city of Olympia. And if we have a cohesive council, some of those are possibilities.
Let's take it up to a higher level than our staff's point of view type of big notes. There are people who have gone down to the planning staff says that the hearing record on the planning commission is totally closed and there will be no more public input. A member of the public has gone down and talked to the city attorney's office. And they basically stonewalled. They said, oh yeah, it's closed. It's been 30 years dealing with the State Administrative Procedures Act, which the city did not have to follow. And I've developed regulations. I've held hearings on regulations. And on other cases that went down there, I've actually been a presiding officer. So I know what they're saying down there is by any state standard. They simply do not want to do that. So at the present time, the city council has no independent legal advice. Because there are two people that the city council hires, the city manager and the hearing officer. The city manager hires the city attorney, and they hire the assistant city attorney. The city council has no independent legal advice and have no access to it. But that's what they're told. The fact is, that's baloney. There's an organization, a state agency called the Washington State Municipal Code. Municipal Council.
MSRC? MSRC?
I don't know, I asked for
MRSC.
Council.
One of those.
Yeah.
whatever. They've been in existence for, I know, at least 40 years. As far as I know, they're still funded by the state. But they have, the city council has to do it once you leave the places. Objective is go to the research council. And that's not a major policy issue. And ask them a couple things. One, about this hearing issue. Is this hearing closed? Because I it's totally a bogus position. What's the statutory guidance on it? And secondly, if you can't get other acceptable advice, by the statutes controlling, I think that Olympia is a national municipal city, they prohibit the city from retaining the council, or the council, legal counsel for the city council. Right now, the city manager owns everything. He's got all the chips. He's got the everything. He controls the whole thing. And the city council can stand up and take a position. They do have to all have a contract with that city manager. And if that's not working, then I got to relook at that contract.
So are you going to say that during public comment period?
Say that, yes.
Okay.
I said, listen. I mean, that's the form of engagement here. If you just say, we hired the city manager 5 years ago, and then let him run wild, the city council is not doing his job. And it's getting off from there, but you need to also review how the city council reviews the performance of the city manager. And I'm not talking about an individual, I'm talking about the system.
Actually, that's something I've been working on, Roger. And I got a little sidetracked with the campaign, but I'm about a third of the way done with that. I was working on it at Blanford, but how that's going to evolve.
Well, I can tell you that I sat in some interview meetings with some of the city council candidates. And some of the stuff I'm talking about here has hit a responsibility with at least two of them. So this is not a totally alien concept.
I'm not a political animal, and I probably don't have the words to express my concerns. But, and first of all, I want to say, Karen, thank you so much for giving us a chance to, give you an earful. I don't think in all my time that I've lived in Olympia, I've had a council member actually set up forums like this, especially going into neighborhoods, and I applaud this. the issue that I and a few other people here in the room are dealing with is we live just east of Ingersoll Stadium, and the school district since 2001 has been trying to expand the use of the stadium into a commercial non-district, non-school district use facility. It has a very powerful public address system, and it booms through our homes. Booms through our homes until 10 o'clock at night now, without, there was the hearing examiner did make a ruling at one point, because the city said there's no conditional use permit on Ingersoll Stadium, because it was originally made as a football field for this school, and now it's been brought into the whole school district. Recently, in 2009, they tried to modify the hearing examiner's ruling. They pulled that out. A bunch of neighbors responded. There were, legal actions. They pulled it out. Now they're going to SPIRC. The problem I have is that when city planning is making decisions for city school districts, it's kind of like a good old boy system, and there's really nothing fair about the process as far as I've observed. And I've been following this process extensively since 2001 because I'm one of the closest neighbors to Ingersoll Stadium. They have now gone and said they want to take their expansion of the stadium to SPIRC. And what planning did is they sent out probably 4 notices of the meeting, even though there's been dozens and dozens of responses from neighbors through the years to the City Planning Commission about their concerns about the expansion of the stadium for commercial non-district use. They sent out about 4 notices. They gave us 13 days notice of the meeting. The person that they gave us as the contact planner was out of the office and didn't get back until about 8 days before the meeting. Several of us, well, a few of us, have written and asked, what's the process? How do we put in comments? What happens once the school district goes to SPIRC? We aren't getting any answers. So now the meeting is next Tuesday, and we still don't know what the process is. I know that there are key players in city planning that want the expansion of the stadium, and of course, they're buddies with the school district people, and I feel like I've seen all this manipulation and stuff going on over the years that, that try to out people that are also taxpayers, and they're impacted by all that noise in their homes. We did take it to the city council in 2009 and didn't get anywhere with that either, with that approach. So I guess my concern is, as city council member, what I'm asking you is, can you, let city, the council, maybe the council behind this and say, when people ask you what the process is, how they can make comment, how the process is going to work out, that they get a response.
Well, the school board, they are independently elected, so.
It's not the school board, it's the school district that's doing this. I don't even think I read the school board minutes, and in the minutes, they've never said anything about the school district telling the school board they're going to do this.
No, what we can do are certain ordinances, like we've got noise ordinances. We can do things like that. We can restrict certain activities.
What Todd Stam from planning did is he told the school district in Oak Ford that they could be absolutely as loud as they wanted to be with their loudspeakers because there was an exception to noise control based on a law on a stadium down in Clark County. Later on, one of our neighbors found out that Mr. Stam based that and told the school district that, based that on a non-published ruling that was not for setting precedents, but it got wrapped into the hearing examiner's ruling, so it's there now.
The example of your city staff going rogue, basically doing what they really want to do.
He was very much for the expansions.
Okay, well, what I can do is I can at least call Alan Miller and get a check-in on that one. See what's going on. And you wrote down your phone number on the list?
Yeah, my email's on there, is my phone number. My phone number's on there.
Hey, Jeff.
Hi,
How are you?
good.
But the decibels do often go above the whack, and then, you know, they have some policies that they're supposed to follow, and they hear an examiner's ruling, and they don't follow it, we bring it up, and they correct it for a little while, and then it goes back again to, you know, and we'll say, gee, the loudspeakers have gotten awful loud, and they'll say, oh, they defaulted back to high, we'll fix that, and then it defaults back in, you know, a few months.
It's gotta be frustrating.
It's very loud. My husband gets up at 5 in the morning and we have that noise in our home until 10 at night and the bands and everything. And, you know, we moved there, we knew there was gonna be football games. We didn't know that it was gonna be non-district use and, you know, and now they're wanting to expand it to all youth programs in the community and it just, basically when they redid the stadium, they changed the ability for that facility to be used from 100 events a year to 500 events a year.
And most of those events don't need a PA.
Yeah.
They don't,
So, you know,
but
you
it's
don't-
fun to play with.
We have a scoreboard, you can see the
Yeah, there's
score,
a-
they don't need to tell you.
And PA systems can be aimed, and they can be controlled. It takes a little bit more money, but they can, so that the neighbors don't
And
have.
it takes the school district wanting to do it right now.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's right.
And the school district has another option that they could expand over by Capitol High School, which has a huge, huge park area across the way instead of tons and tons of houses across the way.
And that's a real good point because the Olympia Ingersoll Stadium is the only stadium in the community that is zoned resident, it's in an area zoned residential. The one out in Tumwater is zoned commercial, the one in Lacey is zoned commercial. Most stadiums like this that are used for non-district use are zoned non-residential or mixed use. But this one is only residential and it's closely surrounded by homes.
And Capitol High School would be problematic because Grass Lake Nature Park is just what it says it is. It's a refuge. And the noise would have a really negative effect on that park.
And the noise here has a negative effect on Watershed Park.
And we were there on a Saturday for walking the new piece of property that the city just bought. And we had trouble talking to each other because there was an activity going on at the high school that was louder than, it made it hard for us to hear each other.
And were they using a loudspeaker? And the loudspeaker, the one at Ingersoll is like state of the art, so it's extremely powerful.
Can't be state of the art if you can't control the volume.
Oh, they can control it, they
You
just
can-
don't, it just keeps
I know, but they
defaulting back
can-
to high.
I mean, that's just a matter of wanting to
Yeah,
do
no,
it.
this has 10 levels, but it keeps defaulting back to 10, is what I'm told.
They're just not doing their job because I've worked in stadiums and you can set the equipment to go so high, period, and no one can change it. But you have to be willing to do that.
That's the
Apparently
focus,
they're
that's
not.
the bottom line.
Karen, I have a couple of questions that I've been kind of dying to ask you after the campaign season is over. I think it was appropriate to bring it up at council meeting. Campaigns are still ongoing. But the underground utilities at Wilderness, they built an apartment complex, it was zoned for apartment complex, and the homeowners came, and because some woman knew some lady who had to drop the selling price of her home by X number of dollars, you know, that there was some diminution in property values because of the apartment complex going in, which was already apparently zoned as, for multifamily dwelling when the Wilderness subdivision was built. And you used 140 grand in contingency money for public works and another 10 grand, to do the temporary training intersection because of the bulb outs that is in the city plan to slow, vehicular traffic for pedestrian safety. And, so and you ran, as fiscally responsible and being concerned about, the city wisely spending its limited monies in tough times. What was the purpose of spending 150 grand to bury 200 feet of utilities, other than, to appease the homeowners that were there at the meeting?
It was actually less than that, but, and that was a tough call. What happened was, there's a neighborhood, Redwood Estates, and it's on.
Redwood Estates, I thought it was Wilderness or something.
And in the zoning, it got zoned to single-family residential. And then right next door, there was the same zoning, but it was done to the absolute maximum density. And it was one of those unfortunate incidences where it was incongruent with each other.
How long ago was that zone, so was it zoned for single-family residence when Redwood Estates was built?
Now, that I don't know.
Because that's a fairly
but
old subdivision.
It is a fairly old subdivision. When of course it was put in, it was all wooded lot. Now, from what I understand in the history of it, that there was an original plan that came through, it didn't have as great a density, and then the plan was redone at a greater density. Some of these apartments, and I've told them, it's about 500-foot stretch, and it's a solid wall that runs the property line to people's backyards. It should not have been approved the way it was. When I see that, if I had been a property owner at Redwood Estates, I would have been livid, to be honest with you. That was an inappropriate approval, as far as I'm concerned. And people's real estate value did go down because of that. So now getting to your point, now that's something that happened before I got on council. The approach to this, when you turn into Redwood Estates, there's this huge island. It's about 150 feet in, and you can't speed through there. You would run straight into the island. So, as far as the bulb outs go, the bulb outs are designed to, of course, shorten the distance for crossing. This Redwood Estates gets very little traffic, but also it's to slow cars down. Again, they can't go very fast through there anyway. So, there are some design standards, and you had a community that, quite frankly, was very resentful. No two words about that. They were very angry with the council. They were angry with the city. It got to the point where they were disgusted, and I'm hearing from people, we don't feel that we're listened to. We feel that our property values have gone down. There's been no consideration, to the point where we want to move out of Olympia. And when I hear something to that extent, that someone is so disgusted with the city representation and the services that they want to move out, to me, that is concerning. Now, is that the kind of way, in an ideal world, we ever would have had to spend the money? Absolutely not, Steve. You're right on that one. But it becomes a balancing act. At what point do you say, you try to undo some damage, or at least lessen the blow, to the point where people are going to say, well, maybe we'll still stay here.
I guess my thought was, when was this apartment complex approved? And if it was zoned for that, the actual plan itself may have been a little too dense, but when was it approved? When were those apartments finished? And then, when did this significant diminution in value take place? Was it 2008, when everybody else's property value went down because of the Wall Street meltdown?
Yeah, but not by 95,000. That's the difference. Not at that point in time.
Was there data that was submitted to show that that this diminution of value was attributed solely to the to the apartment complex being built? It struck me as, yeah, they're unhappy, but that's not the city's fault that they're unhappy. It's to some extent, growth happens. And when you buy a house, you need to sort of be aware of what the area around it is being zoned and what might, come in there. And, it just struck me as being probably pandering to, to a bunch of folks who showed up and were mad, and my house went down in value. And I watched that and I'm thinking, my house went down in value. Where's mine? Well, I'm sorry. Everybody else, when state government is shrinking and we're the capital of the state, and people lose their jobs and are taking pay cuts, and of course, real estate values are going down, for several reasons, not just the meltdown. But that seemed to be a rather flippant, an ill-advised response to, an angry neighborhood association. And not saying you don't listen to them, but you also have a responsibility to, use the public works money, what limited amount there is, in a way that, if something happens, the contingency fund is available to use it. All you've done is bury 200 feet of utilities. There's still going to be, above ground wires. I mean, what have you done? I mean, what's been accomplished other than, appeasing people at meeting?
Those are good points.
The other thing was Woba Park. West Olympia Business Plaza. That didn't go through the Parks Commission. It's a deal that Craig Ottavelli did, 1 month after he got on council, and with the Citizens Visioning Group. Yes, got put in the Parks Plan. They haven't raised any money, and I see it as a $300,000 interest-free loan. And again, where did that money come from? And why didn't it go through the Parks Commission? Why wasn't there a public hearing? Why was this done over the course of really what amounted to 4 days? And you have a memorandum of understanding that says we will negotiate with CVG to reach a lease agreement with them. We will try and do it in the next 6 to 12 months, but we will do it within 30 months. And if we don't, then CVG can buy it back for the price we paid for it. That's the interest-free loan. So why didn't you have a lease agreement in hand rather than just an agreement to try and reach an agreement before you parted with $300,000?